Yes, I'm Jennifer Hansen. This is my 19th year in education. I've taught general ed and special ed in Louisiana, Germany, Virginia, and now I'm currently the instructional coach at Fort Riley Elementary. This is my 5th year in the position. So that's just a little bit about me.
Perfect. All right, did you get the questions I sent you, Jennifer?
Yes, I did.
Can you see them, Jennifer?
No, I see you.
Okay, let me see if I can get them to see the students. No, that's not work. No, it's okay. There's a way to set the camera. I just can't. Yes, please. Yeah, but there's a way so you can see the class. I have the camera up here to see you guys, but I don't know how to get it to there to there.
Oh, that's odd. Where's your mouse? I can't see anything. Okay, that was me. Huh, that's weird. Oh.
Hi.
That's so odd. So what happens if we shut it off? Oh, is it? Oh, it is from your computer. That's why.
Does it need to be hooked in through there?
Hmm?
Does it need to be hooked in through here to get it?
Because if you turn on, that's weird. I don't know why it isn't connected.
Can we mirror it or something? Can we share screen?
Yeah, I don't know how to make that. No, that's odd. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. We'll try it this way. All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started. I'll see if I can figure out how to switch to the camera to you. But does someone want to pose a question to Jennifer, or do you want to just run through the questions you guys sent? What would you guys like to do? What? Would you like to pose your questions directly to Jennifer, or do you want to just answer the questions kind of on a list I sent her? List? Okay, Jennifer, do you want to tackle them from the beginning?
Okay, so what are the best strategies to help special education students feel included in everything? So that's kind of, it's all depending on the student. You'll hear that a lot in education and especially in special ed. Each student is different, no matter if they're general ed, special ed, ELL. Each student's different, so it's all depending on that student and that classroom teacher's atmosphere in her classroom. So if there's like a particular strategy or like situation you want to know more about, if you want to be a little bit more specific with that one.
So you want to elaborate on that question they sent? What are the best strategies to help? Were you like, what specifically were you looking for?
Just like how to make, so like if it's a general ed classroom, how to make sure that you're treating them like as more of a normal student, so it's not like addressing the whole class and then you're addressing that student. So like how to like make those addresses.
Okay. Did you hear that, Jennifer?
We're unstable.
We're unstable. Did you hear that question, Jennifer?
I think so. She was just asking more like where it's normal and like where the student doesn't feel kind of like they're being singled out.
Yeah.
Is that kind of, that's really the way special ed, at least in this county and most places I've taught, a lot of times you don't even know really who the special education student is if you're doing a full inclusion model. Because a lot of times now, especially on state testing and things like that, your general ed students can have a lot of the same accommodations and modifications that a special ed student can have. They can have the test read aloud. They can have a quiet setting. A lot of things that I see is as long as the student's needs on the IEP are being met, we'll have a group I might pull out, or the SPED teacher might pull out 2 gen ed kids and 3 SPED kids. And so there's a lot of times that if you walk into a classroom, you really don't know who is the SPED kid. A lot of times with assessments, the directions are read, and then usually they get the same exact test, but maybe a part's been taken off. Or there's a note on their test, do not answer this question. Or maybe they work with a para, and like I said, it's not just the special ed student, but also gen ed students working and getting that extra help, and a lot of scaffolding for the students.
Excellent. All right, so on the next question, Jennifer, how should one handle parents who will not accept a diagnosis?
That's a sticky situation, because there are a lot of parents that have that perception that SPED is their kids are going to be pulled out all day. They're going to be labeled. Kids are going to know. And I think it's just reassuring that the younger we can help students and really get those things they need in place and scaffolding the lessons that help them best meet their needs, most likely they're not going to need that later on throughout their educational career. And I think it's just really stressing and having that open conversation with parents. Let them come in, run through a day how it works. Listen to their concerns and make sure you validate their concerns. That's one of the biggest things. We might feel as an educator that that's just petty, but this is their baby. And any concern, we have to make sure it's a validated concern. And, you know, we really listen to what they have to say.
Excellent. Anyone follow up on that, or do we ever go to the next question? Next question. Okay. So the next one, Jennifer, is what is the best way to be able to tell when a student should be taken out of the general education setting?
Well, that's also depending if it's academic or behavioral. Academic, if they are unable to meet the needs with the small accommodations or modifications to the assessment or to the curriculum, if they're being unable to be successful when the teacher is scaffolding the curriculum or the standards, a lot of times now we look at the state of Kansas has taken, especially the ELA standards, and you can see here's what they need in first grade. Okay, well, they're not able to meet that standard, so let's go vertically down and see, can we modify this within the classroom just one grade level below to help them get to that. Usually you see a lot of, if the student needs to be pulled out, they're 2 to 3 grades below, and a lot of times, even when they are pulled out, they have to have access to the general ed curriculum. So it's usually during that MTSS time, or maybe that small group. If we do a lot of literature circles, and so maybe that circle time is when you're pulling them out and meeting their needs.
Okay. Excellent. And a follow up on that, or is that good? All right. So the next one was, who do we turn to, or what do we do when everything we have tried with special education student fails?
The first thing you want to look at is you definitely want to make sure, if you're the SPED teacher or you're the gen ed teacher, there's communication with the SPED teacher and gen ed teacher at all times. It shouldn't come to that point where you've done everything and nothing is being successful. That open communication where you're saying, okay, we're working on this, what are some other strategies? Maybe that's when the pullout is necessary to focus on those basic needs. If you're working in math, maybe they don't have their place value, so of course they can't add and subtract multi-digit numbers. Or in reading, they can't read multisyllabic words because they don't have that basic sounds that they need.
Okay.
But I can't stress enough how important it is that the SPED teacher and gen ed teacher need to talk weekly, if not daily.
Okay. Excellent. So how much time should the student with special needs be spending in the regular classroom? Student wants to make sure they feel included and part of the community of the room, but they may not be able to teach them appropriately for the entire day if they need special assistance.
That's when you have to start off with the least restrictive environment, making sure that they are unable to access the general ed curriculum. So then once you've determined that, and a lot of times you'll have a student that's maybe can access the general ed curriculum in math, but not able to do it in reading. So it's just knowing that student's needs and constantly looking at the assessments to make sure you're meeting those needs.
Okay, excellent. So one of the students said they've heard a lot through, have heard a lot through taking my special education classes that the burnout rate is very high for new teachers. What is the way to prevent this, and how does this seem to be, why does this seem to be the case?
SPED is a very challenging position to be in. I was lucky enough to do 3 years, usually 3 years gen ed, 3 years special ed, 3 years gen ed. But one of the best things you can do is you have to make sure you take time for yourself. It will be there when you come back the next day. Find time if you have a family, make sure you're spending that time with the family, your kids. Ask for help. The best thing you can do is ask the seasoned teachers for help. They're there to help you. Most places in Kansas, you have a mentor. Ask your mentor. It's just being able to ask for help. Even after 19 years, I still have to ask for help, and you have to know it's okay. What's not okay is to fail the student. And so if you fail the student because you're not asking for help, then that's when an issue arises.
Definitely. Any follow up on that? Is everyone good? Okay, the next one was, how can I best create an open and positive relationship with the student's parents to create a back and forth dialogue for the benefit of the child?
Constant communication. Start from the very beginning. Every year I would send home a letter telling about myself. Make sure they have your email. But I will say, don't ever give out your cell phone number. That will be the #1 mistake you do. Your personal phone is your personal. Make sure you keep school life and home life separate, because that will cause some friction. Even if you think it's the closest parent, you still want to have that separate. But constant communication. I always liked sending home, like if I did a draft of an IEP, sending home to the parents, knowing that they're a draft, asking what are you thinking? Sending home parent surveys to get their opinion about their student. Just letting them know you always have an open door policy, that if they want to come in, asking for volunteering. Even though you're a special ed class, they can still come in and read to your students, do anything. Just volunteering is a great way to have that. They feel like you want them there without them overstepping the boundaries, but you're welcoming them in.
Excellent. So going into the classroom now, some of the questions related to how do you modify lessons to involve everyone?
One thing I have done previously is pre-teach. So the SPED teacher, what they could do is you tell them, hey, tomorrow we're going to be covering this subject and whatever. Can you pre-teach some vocabulary? Can you pre-teach the math lesson? That's a great way to modify to make sure everyone's included. That also gives them a little heads up on what to expect, because a lot of your kids, they're anxious. If they know something's new is going to be coming in the class and they have all their peers around them, just having that little bit of a heads up about what's going to happen. You'll have some great parents that you send home like, hey, we're going to be covering this tomorrow. There's so many, we use Engage New York here in Geary County, and there's there's parent lessons, there's videos parents can watch, so they're familiar. But I can say that's probably one of the best ways that you can help your students be ready for the next day is to pre-teach.
Excellent. So what would you say, or how do you know which teaching strategy works best when working with special education students?
That's a trick question because you don't know. The thing about it is, as I said earlier, every kid is different and you just really have to try. I always like to do a student interest inventory of my students. That way you know, what are they interested in? Some kids like games, some kids don't like games. So they would rather you just sit there and show them how to do it than play a game. That's probably one of the best ways to know the strategies, what works best with them. Always trying to incorporate all the different modalities. Each lesson you want to try to reach those. Can you do it each lesson? No. So don't stress yourself out trying to do it every single lesson. But making sure you're know the students. If you're in a special ed, you have a smaller group of students, and you might have to write you have 10 kids on your caseload, you might have to write 10 different plans, but find a way that you can reach all those kids using the different modalities, the different accommodations. But I just can't stress enough that you just have to know that student.
Okay. So that kind of builds on the next couple of questions. They wanted to know, how do you appropriately include all students with all types of exceptionalities? And how do you know you're taking the best route with those students?
Again, getting to know the students. I taught one of my last years in the gen ed classroom. I had an autistic boy. I had a girl that had signs of schizophrenia and things like that. So it's preparing them. That's one thing I was just talking with my administration is lesson planning, how important it is to know the standards and know, not just pick up the manual and say, okay, I'm teaching this, I'm going to read from the manual, but actually knowing the backwards planning. Okay, this is what I want the kids to be able to do at the end of the lesson. How am I going to get them there? So knowing your class and what makes up your class, by that backwards planning, you're going to be able to think, oh, well, you know, if I want to do this, Johnny's going to need me to maybe do this for him. And Sarah might need this. So it's keeping in mind as you're lesson planning, because if you don't lesson plan and you're not ready for the things that could come up, you're not going to be ready for everything, but the things that could come up, the lesson's just going to fall apart and you're not going to meet the needs of anyone in your classroom, your high to your low.
Yeah, excellent. So another one said, one question I have is when it comes to different tactics. I currently work as a para and I work with special ed students, and I feel like I'm lacking some tactics when working with them. That may come from me lacking experience. However, I feel like there are some tactics for calming down or convincing students that your way is the correct way.
There may be students you never get them to see that your way is the correct way. That's just reality. But calming, students, kids know, and if you get anxious about it, they're going to get anxious about it. Just knowing like how to talk to them, and a lot of times, even as adults, we just need time. Give them a time to think about it. We have the chili corner at our school, a lot of places, and the teachers have even put themselves in it. So kids know that this is not just if you're being naughty. This is if you know you need that calming time. And so I think having that secure place in your classroom, but it is a great way, or somewhere in your school. We actually have a play therapy room in our school that kids know they can just go in there. There's soft balls. But again, it's finding out that kid. Some kids maybe draw. Some kids just need to be left alone. So it is just getting that toolbox and seeing what works with those kids.
Excellent. And then do you have some quick tips for inclusion where special education students are going to be in the regular classroom? What are some good ideas for students to implement when helping make the classroom more inclusive?
Give them a toolbox. Give them the tools they need to be successful. If they need a number line, I always liked getting a manila folder, and it was like my kids' testing cubby, and they would put up anytime we took a test. Put the things they need laminated in there for them so they have those things ready, available. Make it available for everybody though. That's the thing, like if you're giving a math test and they need a number line, your highest kid might benefit from having that number line, so make it available. Because one thing I know, in state testing's on the brain because we just started it today, because when you get to that point, you can't tell a kid, go get that, that's going to help you. But if you make it known as you're throughout the year, as you're teaching, that these tools are available and they can help everybody, that's going to really make all students, you know, feel that it's nothing wrong with using the tools.
Okay.
And model how to use it. I always like to model the incorrect way and the correct way. And if you have tools, give kids, no matter what grade you're in, give them time to play with it. Because if you don't give them that time to play with it, they're going to do it anyways.
Okay, good tip. So is it possible for a special needs student to be in a general ed class all day if that is what the parent requests?
Yes, yes. That's what you see more of. I would say probably 98% of our students here at Fort Riley Elementary are inclusion. Maybe they're just pulled out for 20 minutes here to focus on their goals or objectives that are on their IEP. But we have paras that go in and help support the teachers. But I would say it's been since probably the early 2000s since I've seen like where a school is just full self-contained. When I did teach in Virginia, I was a pretty much self-contained teacher. I had students with multiple disabilities. So I did all of their reading and all of their math, and then we pushed in for science and social studies. But a lot of times now we start with the least restrictive, or they may go to a center. Like we at Sites Elementary, which is here on Post 2, they have an ARC room for autism. We have a BD center for behavior. We have the FLS for the functional life skills in town, that for those students that need that more structured teaching.
Okay. And then if you have a para, how best can you utilize paras to support your special needs students?
First thing I can do is make sure you have your expectations for them. That's one thing I had all my teachers do was when a para or anyone first came into their room, they had a folder that had the expectations for your classroom. Making sure they know what is expected when they're in the inclusion room, when they're in the classroom. I think that's the biggest thing, because everybody wants to do what's best for kids. It's just sometimes people don't know how to get there unless they're told. Mm-hmm. And so I would say that's probably the best thing to do is set up your expectations. The number one thing is everything is confidential. Make sure that, you know, you stress that to your paras. Constantly give them PD. They need to know what's going on, and they need help for the things that are most common or things that they might encounter. I would also, you know, talk with the classroom teacher, and maybe that's where you set up the expectations for the paras. What does the classroom teacher want, and what does the special ed teacher want? And y'all collaborate and have that list for the paras. Make sure paras are not in there to grade papers. That is not their job. I've had a lot of teachers that, yes, you get overwhelmed and everything, but that is not the para's job to grade your papers. It can help you, of course, but you know, just make sure that you're using them wisely. But I can't stress enough, just give them the expectations. What do you expect of them? Cell phone use, that's a big thing nowadays. You know, if you don't want them to use a cell phone, make sure you tell them. Or if they need to use it, if there's an emergency, they tell you, hey, I've got to keep my phone out today because of this. Just, you know, making sure that open line of communication, and they know it's okay to come to you and ask questions.
Excellent. Any other questions you guys have or thoughts Megan?
For like class meetings about SPED students, like are there specific books or anything that we can get like a second grade question on, just so that our SPED student feels inclusive and that the whole class knows what's going on?
Were you able to hear that, Jennifer?
No, Della, we have kindergartners leaving, so I didn't hear it.
Okay, say it one more time, Megan. That's a good idea. Come on over. Okay, Megan's gonna come over and ask her.
Okay.
So with classroom meetings for students, so that they're aware of the individuality of each SPED student, are there any books that you recommend for classroom meetings about like any kind of SPED stuff, just so that that student feels supported by their community?
I think I'm a firm believer in classroom morning meetings, starting off that at the very beginning of the year. And a lot of times kids pick up on things and we don't even have to say anything. I think starting off with the strategies of like, what makes a good friend, what are some things you can do? And I'm looking for my book. the first 6 weeks of school is a great book. But I think having those morning meetings and talking about differences and what makes us each unique and modeling, like, we all have something different, and just, you know, saying, okay, well, maybe if this happens, what should happen? But I'm trying to think, I'm looking at my books, because give me 1 second, because I do have a resource that you can subscribe to, and they send you like ideas for classroom management and classroom meetings. So 1 second.
Excellent question. That's a really good idea to have standards in place for meetings and stuff like that. So I really like that idea. So she's looking for a resource. Does someone else have a question?
So the program is Responsive Classroom. And Responsive Classroom has a lot of that for morning meetings. And a morning meeting is where you set up and you usually have a greeting. You can do silly greetings, you can do whatever. I was in a 5th grade classroom this morning before state testing, and they were pinky waving to all of their classmates. You have an activity, a team building activity. You have a share time. So when I was in 5th grade, my sharing might be, what if the world all the cows only produced root beer milk? You know, how would this change? And so things like that, getting kids thinking, because you have those kids that will never share because they feel that academically they're not there. So giving that time for them to be able to, I'm so sorry, we have now our 1st graders are leaving, so they're right outside my window. But it's, if you look up Responsive Classroom and you look up classroom meetings, it changed the way I've taught, and I've really pushed that here at Fort Riley Elementary, and it creates that community within your class.
Excellent. Any other questions? All right, well, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for zooming in and chatting with us.
You're welcome. If they have any questions, of course, you can always just send them to me or tell me at dance on Wednesday.
Okay, I will. Thank you so much.
Oh, Braden wanted to wave.
That's her son.
Okay, bye.
How you doing?
Very good. All right, we'll see you later.
Bye.
Thank you.